Welcome to the Myimpossible podcast. I am Jeff Harmon. I am really excited about this one. We welcome as a guest today, Erika Bogan-Mtui. Erika, on a very personal note, is a forerunner for me. So Erika climbed in her wheelchair Mount Kilimanjaro in September of 2022. And she is very much a mentor and a guide and encourager to me in my journey, not only around climbing Mount Kilimanjaro, but about founding and leading Myimpossible. Erika is the co-founder of Winrica Adventures. They are the tour company in Tanzania that are leading not only groups up Kilimanjaro, but through amazing adventures. And they have a vision for making tourism and climbing and all these adventures more accessible to those with disability. She and her husband are also co-founders of Dealers of Hope, which is an NGO recently founded there in Tanzania that are doing exactly what their name says, dealing in hope and bringing hope to those in their communities and to the surrounding area in Tanzania. This episode is moving. It's a little longer than our typical episodes will be, but I think it's going to be worth your while to spend the time together and hopefully inspire you to take that next step on whatever your impossible is. Erika, welcome to the show, the Myimpossible podcast. Really excited to have you here today.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm excited to be here.
So what is your impossible?
So my impossible, it started as being about me, but then turned into being about something way bigger than myself. But it started with my mental health. And after becoming a paraplegic due to domestic violence and all of the things that came with acquiring a disability in life, I found my mental health in a very, very bad place. And this is years ago now. But I'd say probably about 2018 was when I had what I call my spiritual awakening, which really was a mental breakdown, where I just kind of hit my threshold and was like, I can't do this anymore. And I went through a lot of many years leading up to that of suicidal ideation. And I started in, like I said, 2018, 2019, working on myself, getting into therapy, getting a life coach, figuring out how to use all of the things that had happened to me in a way that it could become somebody else's survival guide. Because when we really get honest with each other, most of us, although we are all individuals, we all have different challenges, there's always somebody else who's facing the same thing that we've already made it through. And so I knew I had come so far and I had a lot of knowledge and experience. And I knew that knowledge and experience could possibly keep somebody else from either, having suicidal ideation or even further, maybe it would help them not commit suicide. So the way that it became more so about other people is as I started into therapy and started my own healing journey and learning. There was a lot of learning on why I was responding behaviorally the way I was, and the fact that there were many, many things that I could do myself, even if it was just learning how to create new thoughts, healthier thoughts. As I started getting better and things started falling into place in my own life, it was right around the time that the pandemic hit in 2020. And a lot of the people in my life that I'm close to are other people with disabilities, and all different disabilities. But the one thing we have in common is that we've lost something, that most people would never think they would lose, and that's the ability to walk, right? So like we become these people who are living in a world that's literally not built for us. And then you add all of the stresses that come with that. And then you add a pandemic where the world is shutting down and they're telling you can't leave home. And so you're already starting to isolate yourself. But then when something like the COVID-19 pandemic hits, I feel like, I know for myself and a lot of other people, we felt even more isolated and separated from the rest of the world. And so it just magnified what our disabilities were already doing in our lives, which then affected our mental health. And pretty early on in the pandemic, I started losing friends with disabilities almost back to back to suicide. And I started realizing like, oh my gosh, this could have been me, but it's not me. And I'm thankful it's not me, but what can I do? What can I do? I know I can't save everybody's life, but there's something I can do. And so I started slowly but surely talking to other people who I knew were struggling. I think the first challenge for me was getting people to admit that they were struggling and reach out, right? Like that's the hardest part when it comes to mental health, is saying, hey, I'm struggling, I need somebody. But I started to try to develop a network, and actually was doing it through the things that we were already doing with More Heart Than Stars. As I am one of the directors. I happen to be the director of adaptive athletes for More Heart Than Stars. So I kind of was already positioned in a really good place and role where people came to me anyway with their problems. But this, like I said, was magnified. This became more about how can I help them to improve their own mental health, all while they're being isolated. And some of them losing their incomes. You lived through the pandemic. So it was around that time, actually right before the pandemic hit, Joey McGlamory, who's like my right hip in everything I do in life and all of my missions, he had made a random Facebook page or a Facebook post, and it was about climbing Mount Kilimanjaro. And he's like, who's coming with me? Well, I happened to be the first one to comment on it. And I'm like, I'm in. And when he saw it, he didn't even comment back. He called me and he's like, are you serious right now? And I was like, about what? He's like, climbing Mount Kilimanjaro. And I was like, yeah, why not? I've really been thinking like, I need to find a way to get people's attention. And I want to get their attention, not necessarily to share my story, but to get them to realize that people in my community, in the disabled community, they're dying and it's not okay. And we need more specific mental health services that are specific to people with disabilities. And the only thing I can think of to do that is I already have this huge platform of thousands and thousands of people that follow me. Like just on TikTok alone, I have 22,000 followers. And I'm like, I can use this maybe to save somebody's life. And even if it's one life, right? Like I can't save everybody, but if I can save one, then the things I went through, it gives me that purpose of like, all right, God, I understand now why you allowed me to go through what I went through and why I'm still here, why you saved me. There was a bigger purpose behind all of it. And Joey is like, oh my God, okay, I'm in tears, but let's make this happen. We can do this. And we didn't know how we were going to do it because financially, I was really, really not in a good place. And I hadn't been for a very long time because of my disability and because of the broken system that surrounds disability, especially when it comes to the financial well-being of people with disabilities. And he's like, I don't know how we're going to do it, but we're going to do it. We're going to raise the money and we're going to get you to Kilimanjaro. And if I personally have to carry you to the top, you're going to make it to the top. And let's do it. It was probably one of the craziest things that far at that point in my life that I'd ever signed up to do, actually to the point that when I hung up the phone with him, and I know Joey like the back of my hand, I hung up the phone with him and I'm like, oh God, what did I just sign up for? What did I just sign up for? This is impossible. This is impossible. How are they going to get me to the top of the helm? I'm going to get to the top of Mount Kilimanjaro, the tallest freestanding mountain in the world. How am I going to get to Africa? I'm thinking all of these things. And, long story short, a whole bunch of things happened in between. I actually, at one point in time, my disability is a spinal cord injury. And it was due to a motor vehicle accident caused by domestic violence. And actually, during the years of training, I was in 2021, I was training through OCR with More Heart Than Scars to climb Mount Kilimanjaro, and I re-broke my back. It was a total freak accident. My doctor's like, yeah, no, you're not going to Kilimanjaro this year. Like, you're going to have to postpone it. And I was like, all right, but I'm still going. And she was like, I can't tell you not to. But there were things like that, like curveballs, speed bumps that happened. Fast forward to September of 2022, and we were just landing in Tanzania to come and climb Mount Kilimanjaro. And I can still remember we landed. It was kind of late at night, so it was dark. And Joey is like carrying me off the plane because I don't do anything the way that we're supposed to, right? Like, I didn't want the airport people helping me. I'm like, nope, Joey will carry me. Gets me down on the runway, and they bring my wheelchair, and he sat me in my wheelchair. I literally went to do my first push to go into the airport to go through customs. And all of a sudden, I still don't really have words. I don't really know what happened, but I got this overwhelming like flood of emotions, and I just started like bawling my eyes out. I'm crying. Now, I need to add that throughout this, we were also filming for a documentary that will be coming out in the beginning of 2025 about my journey to Kilimanjaro and my mission. So I had camera people like, Erika, can you tell us why you're crying? And at that point, like, I couldn't even catch my breath, and I didn't even really know myself why I was crying. And I just remember looking up at Joey and saying, like, I'm home. He's like, what are you talking about? I'm home. I've never felt this way before. Like, I've traveled all over the world, and this is the first time I've gotten off a plane into a foreign country, a third world foreign country at that, and felt like I was right where I was supposed to be. Now, I want you to remember that little piece of the story, because that is the moment I keep coming back to over and over again every time I share the story of Myimpossible to other people. I was just here to climb Mount Kilimanjaro, and within 48 hours, we were heading to the mountain. I can say for me, it was definitely the hardest challenge that I've ever taken on, both physically and mentally. And I don't want to go too far into that yet, but as we were there every single day, I just kept getting more and more confirmation. This is where I'm supposed to be, even though I didn't really understand what that meant. I didn't know if that meant this is where I'm supposed to be in this moment, or this is where I'm supposed to be possibly for the rest of my life. And so there was like this internal conflict going on. I know one of the things that you talk about with Myimpossible is community. And one of the things that still stand out the most to me throughout my journey to the top of Mount Kilimanjaro, I kept saying it over and over, and it was, I can't do this without all of you. And I started to realize that I already had and was continuing to build this amazing community around me that not only supported my vision of bringing awareness on a whole different level to suicide, specifically in the disabled community, but that these people were just as passionate about what I was doing as I was. And most of them also had somebody that they were also climbing for. So I had multiple people I was climbing for. And I started realizing like, all right, God, like I see now. I see how everything has fallen into place in my life. Does that make sense?
Mm. Yeah. Erika, first, thank you. Thank you for all of that. There's so many questions coming up for me. I'd like us to go way back. And you kind of jumped us all the way to 2018 on that spiritual awakening, that moment. Could you take us back farther when you were in the the depths of feeling like this is impossible? I mean, like me, you're an adult whose life got changed. Mine through neurological disease, yours through the accident via domestic violence. But take us back into those moments, or a moment when you looked at this situation that you were in and felt like this is impossible.
So I want to say probably that moment was, I know you have to excuse me if I get emotional. It actually happened multiple times throughout my life, but I want to say from the time I got paralyzed, which was in January of 2002 until 2018, I had moments and it was, I can look now and I know it was just personal growth. I was uncomfortable and I think, life's got to end. I can't do this anymore. And then boom, something would happen and I would shift. And, but I think probably the one pivotal time was actually in 2018 when I had this spiritual awakening in the middle of a breakdown. And the circumstances that led me to that place that I'm like, I can't do this anymore. I don't want to wake up another day feeling this way. I can't wake up another day feeling this way. And the only thing that was keeping me alive was knowing that I had my 3 daughters. And what was actually going on in that moment of time, I was losing my home to foreclosure. I had lost my job as the assistant marketing manager for AM General, which is a vehicle manufacturer in the United States. We had a wholly owned subsidiary of AM General called Mobility Ventures. And it was one of the most brilliant things that were ever made for the disabled community as far as accessible transportation. It was a vehicle that literally, they took a ramp and built a car around it, meaning it wasn't an aftermarket thought. It wasn't a conversion. It was the safest vehicle that had ever been made for people with disabilities. For the first time in the 20-something years at that point that I had been disabled, they actually thought of our community first rather than as an afterthought. And the years that we had that company up and running, and the people I met and the families, the stories I learned, and the families that we helped, the individuals that we helped to be able to have the freedom of mobility in a safe vehicle, right? Like a vehicle that's not cut in half and a ramp added to it. Like that's just a whole nother conversation we can have. But those are not structurally safe, but it is all we've ever had for our community. So to be able to be a part of something like that, a startup company, for the 6 years that I was, and then to lose that, what happened was the business actually ended up going out of business. Not because business wasn't good, but because they had started the business funded on a grant from the Department of Energy, because most of the vehicles could also be ran on natural gas, on CNG, clean natural gas energy. And so, but the company itself actually defaulted. So they weren't able to pay that loan back to the Department of Energy, and all productions were halted and stopped. And so it wasn't something that any of us were expecting. So I lost a huge part of my income. That job gave me, for the first time in 20-something years, it gave me the ability to not have to only have an income from Social Security. and to be able to actually be a normal taxpayer. Actually, I quit getting my Social Security and SSI because I was making plenty enough money. I didn't need those benefits anymore. It was amazingly liberating because for all of the years up until I got that job, I lived off of government assistance. I had food stamps to feed my children. All my kids had Medicaid. I had Medicare. There were all of these things. And there's a whole nother genre, for lack of a better word, of stresses that come with that. Nothing is free. And I was very limited in what I was able to do. So when I landed that job and knew off gate, when I come into this company, I'm making 70 grand a year. And I can report this to the government like I'm supposed to. And I'm going to lose my benefits, but I don't have to worry because I'm making enough as a single mom now to take care of my children, to pay my mortgage payment, to keep the lights on in the house, right? Because those were always my biggest struggles. So when I lost that job, that was the first thing that started to spiral. But in losing that job, there were other things that happened, and it just snowballed. And the biggest thing was my house falling into foreclosure. And now I had to tell my children the only house that I had ever owned, and the one that my two youngest were literally brought home from the hospital to, they lived there their whole life. We were losing it. And I can't tell my kids this. I was going without eating because I wanted to make sure that they were eating and that they didn't know we were struggling. Because I also wanted I know for me, I wanted to protect my kids from all of that. I didn't want them to worry. But at those moments of my spiritual awakening, my mental breakdown, I knew there was not a way out. That I thought there was not a way out. I found a way out. Actually, I still have that home in the United States, even though I live here now in Tanzania. So it all worked out by the grace of God. But you can kind of hopefully understand a little bit more why I was thinking of suicide. I didn't see any way out at all. I didn't see a way to save my home. We already had an auction date. They were literally going to auction my house off. Yeah, it was impossible.
Yeah, I'm just moved by all of it. As I'm learning, having these conversations for the podcast and talking with people, there's something about the human spirit that is extraordinary. And sometimes it happens without the influence of others. Sometimes it happens through the influence and the support of others, but there is something about the human spirit that is extraordinary. I wonder if you would talk about that, your experience, both then and now, and what you see day after day that about this tremendous capacity of the human spirit.
Yeah. So, especially, I think probably even more so now. So I think when in the past, I have not only been the person, but also helped other people come from the darkest places that they could have ever, probably even never imagined being. And I've been able to see them, if nothing else, I've been able to see them, as well as myself, take one little baby step at a time. Sometimes not every day. Sometimes it's every couple of days. But one little thing, they're finding the energy and the will to do just one more thing. Well, let me just try this. I know for me personally, that was exactly what I was going through. I kept looking back at my children, and as much as it felt so real and so relieving to take my own life, because then I wouldn't have to feel the pain I was feeling, right? I would think of my kids, and I'm like, I can't do this to them, because in doing this, in taking my life, I'm transferring all of this pain to them. I have to find one more string to grab. I have to find one more fiber. I don't know where I'm going to find it, but I have to find it. And like I said, sometimes it wasn't even every day. There were multiple days where I didn't even get out of bed because I couldn't. But I kept waking up. And that was what was important, is that I kept waking up. And I see it even more so now, what you're talking about the human spirit, now that I actually live full time in one of the 25 poorest countries in the world, which is Tanzania. I see people on a daily basis when I leave our home, our property, and we just go into the local market to get some vegetables and meat for the day. I see people that are living in conditions that most of us in the United States would have gave up on a long time ago. And they're living with next to nothing, but yet they still get up every single day, and they're still smiling, and they're still hauling their wooden carts into the city, into the market, to sell what they can, to get what they can for that day, to feed their family. And that has shifted my entire outlook on life, and even my understanding of what matters most to me in life. Living here, seeing children who live in our village that their parents can't afford to send them to school. And so sometimes the only learning they may get is coming and visiting me, and me teaching them like 4 words in English, and just how thirsty they are for that, and how grateful they are for me to just teach them how to say, like I said, like 4 words, how are you, in English, I think that's the human spirit that you're talking about. Being able to find light in darkness, being able to find a way to keep going even when we think we can't.
This feels like just the exact moment to talk about your NGO, Dealers in Hope, because it feels like that is, you call it Dealers in Hope, but you're dealers in the capacity of the human spirit and igniting that. Could you just tell us about where Dealers in Hope, where the beginnings of that, and your mission, and what you're up to right now?
Absolutely. So most people don't realize how I ended up in Tanzania, right? Like, I come here to climb Kilimanjaro, and then now I'm living here. I ended up, my husband, my now husband, was my main mountain guide on Kilimanjaro. He was the leader. And it's kind of funny because we joke about it now. The day that I met him was the day after we arrived in Tanzania, and the day before we started our climb. He comes to the hotel. Joey's all excited to finally introduce Winford, that's my husband, introduce Winford to me, because Joey had already climbed the mountain with him the year before. And so he's like, Winford's here to meet you. Got to come say hi. And I'll never forget rolling over to him, and he smiled at me, and he went to shake my hand, and I go, "Can I hug you?" And he goes, "Okay, I can hug you." And he bent down and he hugged me. And Joey and some of the other guys that were on my team, that were my community here, they were laughing because I had joked around with my children, my family, my friends. And I was like, don't be surprised if I end up finding the love of my life in Africa and I don't come back. And literally, when I tell people the story, they're, how did you know? I'm like, I can't explain that. He looked at me, he smiled at me, and I knew I needed to hug him. And they started laughing and they said, Winford, Erika thinks that you might be her husband. You might be the man God made for her. And he goes, huh? And you could tell he was kind of uncomfortable and he didn't know if we were joking or if we were being serious. I mean, he was really confused. And I said, I'm serious. And he said, I've always wanted to marry a white woman. And we all laughed and nobody said anything else about it. But by the end of that week, and spending more time with him and getting to know him, I knew I have to come back here. And then it kind of started making sense on why, when Joey put me in my wheelchair, I had that overwhelming feeling of like, oh my gosh, I'm home. So none of this was planned whatsoever. I've never met Winford in my life. Never talked to him on the phone, nothing. I met him that day at the hotel and just knew. And so long story short, I came back in February of 2023 by myself to be with him and to start a life with him. I landed here on February 15th, 2023 by myself. He picked me up. We were married by March 17th, 2023. And we've been building a life ever since then together. But one of the things that drew me to my husband, and especially the more and more I got to know him, right? Because we had those months while I was in the States where we did get to know each other. By no means do I want people just coming to Africa and like, I'm marrying you. That's dangerous. Don't do that. This is a once in a lifetime thing that happened. I say it was God. It was nothing but God. But over the time of getting to know him, I started to find out that he had a heart like mine. His heart is here. And the way that he grew up and he was born on Mount Kilimanjaro and grew up on Mount Kilimanjaro in a very, very small, very poor village and was born to a very, very poor family. And so he was only able to go to grade 7 because his family couldn't afford. He has 5 other siblings. He's the oldest boy, but his family couldn't afford for everybody to continue going to school. He's told me stories of being 7 years old and not having any food and going to the neighbor that grew sugar cane and begging for a piece of sugar cane. And that's what he would take home to his brothers and sisters to chew on. So they had calories because they were so hungry. And I'll still never forget him telling me these stories. And I'm just like crying because again, I can never, even with the impossible times that I had already experienced in my own life, I could have never wrapped my brain around that level of poverty. And it also was what made me go, oh my gosh, here I've been like crying and contemplating taking my life for years. And I had a beautiful house that I lived in with air conditioning, central air and heat and electricity and running water and flushable toilets. And here's this man who grew up with nothing. He literally would sleep in a bag of rice to keep warm at nighttime on a dirt floor. So he's telling me these things and he's telling me that his dream was always to be able to take care of his family. And when I say his family, not just his kids, because he had 3 children, I have 3 children, and then we just adopted one together. But his hope or his dream was to bring hope to the people in his village. And through what I mean by bringing hope, it was to show them that if he could get out of that village and build a better house and put his children, pay for his children to all go to school, including to university, to be able to send money back home to his mom and dad to where they weren't starving anymore, to build his parents a new house, that other people could as well. And that he was wanting to share the knowledge of how he did it with people younger than him so that they didn't have to go through the hardships that he went through. And I realized as he's telling me these things, like, we're not the same person. You want to use your experiences as a survival guide to help other people, just like me. And it was like a beautiful like union of dreams. And the name Dealers of Hope. Well, first we started our tour company, Winrica Adventures, and we knew when we started the company and in our business plan, we had under that umbrella, we were going to have an NGO, which is a non-government organization. Through that, we wanted to be able to, so we saw the needs here in and around us in Tanzania, and those needs were education. People needed to know how they could take what they were already good at and turn it into a source of income for their families. We knew that there were a lot of people in and around us that also were affected by disability. And when I say disability, I'm not talking about just physical disabilities, right? Like invisible disabilities as well. Here, there's a lot of, you take, the crisis, the mental health crisis in the United States, and you magnify that times 20, and you're in Tanzania. The suicide rate here is profound. And a lot of them, they commit suicide when they can no longer bring income to their families, because for them, life is over. If they can no longer do things for their families, they take their lives. Alcoholism is another huge one. And the root of most addiction, in case people don't know, typically is trauma, right? And so I started to see the trauma that these people, they didn't know anything but trauma, but it wasn't looked at as trauma. It's normal here, right? Like most people aren't born into a family that can afford to eat. They're not born into a family that has a nice home. They're not born into a family that is able to financially send their children to school. That is the reality here. They don't know, nor do they have the ability to think of the future, because they're just trying to survive the day. And I started thinking, and the things that I was already doing and wanting to do with this NGO wasn't just specific to people in wheelchairs, although that is a part of what Dealers of Hope does. We do find people who come to us that have a disability, and they're not able to do anything but beg. And a lot of the reason is because they don't even have a wheelchair. They can't even leave their home. So like, if they have no way to move, like how are they going to move in life, right? So it starts with simple things, but also we offer, we teach financial intelligence and how to plan for a future, how to save, how to budget. Even on very, very little, you can still find ways to budget for tomorrow. And then I think the biggest thing was entrepreneurism, is teaching them how to use the skills that they already have, or teaching them skills that are easy to teach so that they can start their own kind of businesses or multiple sources of income for themselves and their families. So most of the people here in Tanzania, they thrive off of the tourism. They're either mountain guides or porters on the mountain. Now, I want to put this in perspective for you. A mountain guide is the highest paid person on a mountain. Do you know how much they make per day if they have a trip? Guess. 20. You were going to guess. I'm sorry, and I interrupted.
That's all right. I was gonna say a low number, like $15, $20.
$20 a day. And that's only if they have a group, right? So if it's the low tourist season and there aren't any groups here, or whichever travel company you're working for doesn't have enough bookings, then you have no income. Now, a porter makes $10 to $15 a day, which is even less. And that's if the groups tip. So you don't know how many times I've heard of groups from other countries. My husband has told me, like, he had a group from Switzerland some years back, and they worked so hard. They were on the mountain for 8 days, and it was a really big group of people, like almost 30 people. And nobody tipped them money. They gave them chocolate. And he said, he's sitting here and he's telling me this, and he starts laughing and he goes, baby, I was thinking in my head, how am I going to feed my family with chocolate? What am I going to do with this chocolate? I can't give this to my children for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. This is chocolate. It's sugar. But people don't understand because they've never lived here. They don't really realize that, like, this is real life. So the more and more that we started putting our knowledge, our skills together, Dealers of Hope was born. And the way that we named it Dealers of Hope actually is because we just really wanted to use the hashtag Hope Dealers. Because I'm like, I don't know. I wouldn't want to deal anything else in life but hope. And I started to see the little things that we were doing. Like, for example, one of the families that we've helped, the husband, he came to me and he said, you know how to build websites. Can you teach me? I was like, yeah, I mean, I'm not like a website like person, but I just use templates, like template-based programs like Squarespace, Wix. And like, I didn't go to school to learn that. So I don't know why I couldn't teach you how to do it. Do you know this guy now? This is like just month in. I taught him this maybe 3 months ago. He already has 3 different local businesses paying him good money to build their website. He has a skill. And it took me literally a week, maybe an hour a day for 7 days for me to teach him how to use Squarespace or Wix to build a website. You know, and so we just continue to snowball after that, you know, where we're still really, really new. We're just really gaining, actually, as we speak, our office in the village is being built. And we're able to start opening up for people to submit applications to be our Faces of Hope, which is what we call our recipients. Right now, we only have 3. One of them whom is actually living with us. And we just got legal guardianship of her. She's a young girl that's 14 that was born into a very, very poor tribe called the Maasai tribe. And she was born with what we now know was osteogenesis imperfecta type 1, brittle bone disease. When we got her, she had been in the cast since November of last year. And if you know anything medically, you should never be in a cast longer than 6 weeks. So you can only imagine what the doctor's words when we took that cast off of her leg is, this is a disaster. But then as we started really examining the situation and doing tests, and we started figuring out, okay, the good thing is we don't have to amputate her leg. But that's how dire it was when we got her. And now here it's a month into her living with us, and she has her own wheelchair, and she's zooming around the house all by herself, inside and outside, because our home here also happens to be wheelchair accessible, which is a huge blessing. And also one of the biggest reasons why she came here to live with us is just because it was safer for her. So we say, she calls my husband and I auntie and uncle. That her family, the family that raised her is still very, very much involved, but they're very poor and they don't have the means to be able to take care of her or for their house to be set up for her. And so just doing these little things, we just changed this young girl's life. We gave her hope. And we really didn't do that much. The wheelchair we gave her happened to be an extra chair that I had here. I don't need 2 wheelchairs. So I gave her the extra one I had because it fit her perfect. You know, and this is what Dealers of Hope is all about. We all can do something to help someone, we can't save everybody, right? We can't help everybody, but we can all help someone, right? And so that's how we're dealers of hope. That's how we become hope dealers. And, we tell people who, as we share these stories of Faces of Hope, we share, like, the good thing is we're in Tanzania. $40 is enough money to feed a family of 3 for 1 month. It's very, very cheap here. And so it doesn't cost a lot for people to sponsor the families and the individuals that we are helping. Which is why we've been able.
If people are listening now, Erika, and are moved to want to know more and support Dealers of Hope, where can we send them?
So our website right now is a page on Winrica Adventures website. We're in the process in between having groups come and planning for your group and all of the things that we're doing, taking care of our girl. We are in the process of building an actual full website, but right now it's still, if you go to winricaadventures.com and click on charity, it will go directly to the Dealers of Hope page. As of now, we have a Venmo account that is set up because we're so new and we're still waiting. We're hoping in another 3 weeks, we should have our full registration. So one of the things I kind of left out is we had to do a name change. So the NGO originally was going to be called something else, and that kind of fell through, which is okay. And so that's how we got to Dealers of Hope. But in having to change the name, we had to do a new registration. And so we're waiting for that registration to be totally, fully in place, and we'll be able to have other ways for people to donate. One of the big things that we want to do is set up easy ways like PayPal and stuff like that. But we're also developing a program where we will have our Faces of Hope, which are the people who gave applications that need help, on our website. And you'll be able to go and read about each person, individual or family, and see what their needs are itemized. And you can say, hey, I want to help to pay for the school fees for this child for the year, which is $200. And this is what I want to do this year. You can say, hey, I want to give $200 a month. I want to give $40 a month to this family so they have food every month. Then you can do that. And you become one of their hope dealers. And you've also become one of the sponsors, kind of adopting that family or that individual, which is the idea that we're moving towards.
I'm so excited to share this with the world through this and through Myimpossible. We're brother and sister organizations, and I'm excited for what's to come. You and Winford and those around you, because I know it's not just the two of you. You guys are making the impossible possible, and that's just so good. Erika, this is amazing. It's a gift to. I've heard your story in different forms, and you telling it to me personally, but really moved this morning by this. And as I said, I'm excited to share you and your story and your Myimpossible story with the world. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to talk more in depth about it, because my story does have so many different facets to it, but this is the core of my dream of Myimpossible, and we're living it.
Yes. And I can't wait to be even more part of the story in Myimpossible.
Yes. We are so blessed to be able to lead you. And saying that, I want to also add, Winrica Adventures, we didn't form our company to get rich or to be the #1 tour operator in Moshi, Tanzania. We literally made this company to provide more jobs to the people in and around us. We were very blessed that I have businesses in the U.S. And so financially speaking, we didn't need to have a tour company. But my husband's like, why don't we build our own company? There are so many people that need jobs, and this is one of the ways we can give hope. And one of the things about our company is we don't contract. We don't make any of our workers sign a contract. And that is something that's totally different than most tour operators here in Tanzania. They normally have their employees sign a contract, and then they're locked in only with that tour operator for however many years, 5 to 10 years, depending on that contract. That limits them. That means when that company is in the low season and they don't have any trips, they can't go work as an independent contractor for another company. So we're trying to change that part of the culture, and our porters and guides are never contracted with us. So if they say, hey, or we say, hey, we have a group coming in September 2025 to help Jeff get to the top of Kilimanjaro, and they say, I have another climb, we're like, no worries, because we know there's literally hundreds of others that need that job. And so it's just another way that we're trying to be dealers of hope.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thank you, Jeff.